A billionaire CEO in a golden restaurant forces a young black waitress to crawl on the floor. What happens next destroys his $2 billion empire. The restaurant glowed with golden chandeliers and polished marble floors, a palace built for the wealthy to indulge. But beneath the shine, cruelty lurked. At one corner table, a CEO sat with his board, his laughter echoing louder than the music. Their glasses were filled with champagne, their arrogance with power. And then came the moment that silenced the room. A waitress, young and poised, was commanded to do the unthinkable. Forced onto her knees, humiliated before strangers, treated like an animal. What no one knew was that the girl they mocked was not just a waitress. She was their greatest threat. Her name was Amara. 23 years old, she carried trays heavier than her frame, yet moved with grace through the bustling restaurant. To the patrons, she was invisible, just another face in uniform. But behind her calm smile was a storm of ambition. Amara wasn't simply working for tips, she was studying every corner of the world she served. Raised by a single mother in a neighborhood dismissed by the powerful, Amara knew struggle as intimately as breath. She had dreams bigger than the city skyline, dreams of building a business empire that would one day make her untouchable. By day, she studied finance at a local university. By night, she worked tables in the most prestigious restaurant in town, where billionaires closed deals over wine and cigars. She listened, she observed, she learned. While others mocked her, she gathered knowledge like currency. Every overheard negotiation, every careless boast from the rich became part of her education. But there was one man she could never forget, Victor Steele, a name that carried weight in boardrooms across the nation. His company, Steele Dynamics, was valued at over $2 billion, built on ruthless acquisitions and an iron grip on competitors. He dined there often, each visit dripping with entitlement. To him, waitstaff were beneath notice, unworthy of dignity. But that night, however, his arrogance would go too far. The room would witness not only Amara's humiliation, but also the first spark of her reckoning. The restaurant buzzed with its usual symphony, cutlery striking porcelain, murmurs of quiet wealth, and the clink of glasses celebrating victories built on other people's labor. Amara moved among it all, balancing trays with practiced precision. At Steele's table, the energy was different. He sat surrounded by executives, his voice booming as he bragged about acquisitions that crushed small companies. His laughter was the kind that demanded others laugh too, even if there was no humor. When Amara approached with a tray of wine, Steele's eyes settled on her. There was no recognition of her as a human being, only as a servant, a shadow in his world. He smirked and leaned back in his chair. "Drop it on the floor," he sneered. The executives chuckled, assuming it was a joke. Amara froze. But Steele wasn't joking. His hand waved downward, commanding her to place the tray on the ground. She obeyed, her face calm, though her heart pounded. Then came the cruelty. With a smirk that chilled the air, he tapped his shoe against the polished floor. "Now, crawl." Gasps filled the restaurant. A hush fell as eyes turned. Some guests looked away, ashamed, unwilling to confront what was happening. Others stared, morbidly entertained. Amara lowered her gaze, the humiliation searing her skin. On her knees, she crawled the short distance to the table, her dignity crushed under the weight of silence. The laughter of Steele and his boardroom companions cut deeper than any insult. But beneath the humiliation, Amara's resolve hardened into steel. She had endured the unendurable, and in that moment, something inside her shifted. She was no longer simply a waitress serving the powerful. She was a storm waiting to break. That night, as she left work, her humiliation fueled her like fire. Amara knew more than anyone realized. Over months of serving Steele and his executives, she had overheard whispers of deals, shadow accounts, and secrets too valuable to ignore. She had notes, names, details recorded quietly on her phone under the guise of harmless reminders. And in that moment of cruelty, Steele had unknowingly written his downfall. The next morning, Amara didn't clock in for her shift. Instead, she walked into the office of a rival firm, a company long suffocated by Steele dynamics. In her hands, she carried the ammunition no army could rival: information. She laid out everything she had gathered: hidden offshore accounts, fraudulent deals disguised as acquisitions, evidence of bribes and insider trading. Years of exploitation unraveled in neat, organized files. The rival firm took her seriously. Within days, regulators were alerted, and Steele Dynamics became the center of a storm. News broke across every outlet. The empire was built not just on arrogance, but on crime. Stocks plummeted, shareholders fled, and the board scrambled. Victor Steele, once untouchable, now found his name dragged across headlines. Investigation stripped him bare. What had taken decades to build collapsed in a matter of weeks. And as cameras captured his downfall, Amara stood in the background, not as a victim, but as the silent architect of justice. The night he had forced her to crawl like an animal was the night he unknowingly set the stage for his own destruction. The restaurant no longer whispered his name in awe. Instead, Steele became a cautionary tale of unchecked arrogance. His empire, once valued at $2 billion, was carved apart and sold for scraps. Amara didn't celebrate loudly. She didn't need to. Her victory was not in headlines, but in the quiet reclaiming of her dignity. She walked taller, knowing she had faced degradation and turned it into power. Her story spread quietly at first, whispered among waitstaff and workers everywhere. She became a symbol, not of revenge, but of resilience. She had shown that even the humblest could topple the mighty when armed with courage and truth. And in boardrooms where men like Steele once laughed, silence lingered, because now they knew every waitress, every worker, every overlooked face might be the one who holds their empire's fate. Amara returned to her studies, but with new doors open. Investors reached out, inspired by her brilliance and her fire. Within years, she built her own firm, one rooted not in exploitation, but in opportunity. Her humiliation was temporary, her victory eternal. And so the question lingers: how many empires have been built on the backs of those dismissed as invisible? And how many more will crumble when the invisible rise?